So, what's next then? What Maisie Knew, which is a new film based around Not by Henry James that was originally done at the turn of the century and was apparently, at time of publication, caused quite a stir because it focuses on this young family, mother, father, child, wealthy, American, and the parents break up, and the child, Maisie, is split between the two of them, so they're given equal access. And at the time of publication, this was a huge thing, in that just people didn't divorce, and certainly the child was never given to anybody other than the mother to look after. It's one of these things. So at the time, it was a very interesting theory. The question obviously has to be whether or not a film that was so much shocking of its time can make the transition to the screen and still have a point to make in the modern day. And I think it certainly does. I mean, you got the father, Beale, who's played by Steve Coogan, and he's sort of an art collector, and he goes around the world buying pieces of art and selling them on, that kind of thing. And you've got his partner, who's played by Julianne Moore, who is basically a faded rock star from sort of the 80s and 90s. And they, for the first part of the film, they're together and you see their life through Maisie's eyes. So you constantly see, from this child's level view, you see the pair of them arguing in quite brutal terms with each other about who's to blame for what, and you sort of watch gradually the marriage breaking up. And you also have, in this relationship, you've got Maisie's nanny. Now, it seems the relationship between Maisie and the nanny's main job is to get the kid away from this fighting, to try and stop her from getting horribly scarred by it all. So, the divorce happens, and as we say, they're both given joint custody of Maisie. And the first time Maisie comes to her father's house, she's shown to her room, which she's told has been picked and done up, which it has, but it's been done up by her nanny, who is now dating Beale, the father. Now, it becomes a bit of a farcical relationship, in that you're forced to see all this through Maisie's eyes, and to try and see this young child trying to comprehend why the nanny now can't come back with her to her mother's house, but has to stay with her father. And you then, of course, see her mother, Julianne Moore, who's busy interrogating Maisie to ask her about this relationship between Beale and the nanny. And you also suddenly see the mother getting straight on the phone and telling lawyers and things about this development, that the nanny and the father are now having a relationship. Now you also see a number of parties happening within Maisie's mother's house, and quite often you'll see Maisie being woken up by the noise, coming downstairs and seeing all these strangers in the house. Particularly, there's one stranger in particular who seems to be getting on rather well with her mother. And Maisie is sent to a sort of preschool nursery kind of affair, and on certain days her mother or father is chosen to pick her up. Now, at first, the mother and father try and basically control the situation by not returning the child on time. And what develops is they start to realise actually that is not the most constructive way to hurt the other party. The more constructive way they have found is to dump this child frequently onto the other party and just leave, because that makes things a lot more difficult for the other party to understand. And what's suddenly stuck in the middle now is the nanny and the mother's new boyfriend are suddenly stuck, quite literally, holding the baby in this sense. They're forced to constantly collect this child, and what you start to see is that the only people who seem to have genuine love and concern for what is best for the daughter are not the parents, it's the partners. And when the relationships break down, inevitably, that's where Maisie goes. Now, in terms of the story, I felt the ending was quite cliche. There's no getting around that. It ties up for me far too neatly. And the parents seem to relinquish control of the child far too easily. Now, that's in keeping with the characters, but it's just, for me, it's not realistically how a parent would behave. You would do everything in your power to look after your child, and yet both these parents seem more obsessed with their careers than their daughter. And so that didn't ring true so much. But what's quite impressive is that certainly Julianne Moore, I've not hated a character as much as that for an awfully long time. She just imbues this character with such complete lack of empathy. And you really, really hate this person and what she does to her daughter and how she uses her and how she thinks that she can just pick up or drop the daughter as she feels. I mean, you get this to a lesser extent with Steve Coogan as Beale, because you sort of see him occasionally taking Maisie out and suggesting maybe she ought to come with him to live full-time in London. But he seems to understand, ultimately, in that decision, what is better for Maisie is not to be with him. With Julianne Moore, you never get that. She never seems to understand that what's better for the child is not to be with her, or maybe is being with her, but in a more stable environment. I mean, there's a few really interesting things, particularly at one point they buy Maisie a turtle. And you understand through Maisie that she understands now responsibility of looking after this turtle, and she doesn't seem to understand why her parents can't show her the same level of respect and empathy and caring as she showed the turtle. And I guess ultimately, first things first to say is, as a film, really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really cracking film and a great way of spending a few hours. The story, as I've said, it does get a bit too neat and tidy. It's a bit of a cliched ending, the whole thing, how it goes, the fact that at no point are police sent out looking for the missing child. It all seems to me a little bit too cliche and wouldn't happen in the real world. But having said that, performance by Maisie is superb. You do genuinely get the sense this is a child who genuinely can't understand why all this is happening to her, and doesn't understand why they can't just have one happy family together. You see a couple of really heartbreaking scenes when Julianne Moore is out doing a recording session, and she leaves Maisie with her boyfriend, who is getting on with her really well and is actually taking the time to talk to this child. And you can just see the pure, blazing envy in Julianne Moore's eyes, the fact that somebody else is having a better relationship with her daughter than she is having. And so she storms out of the booth and basically demands the kid comes in with her, because she has to try and prove how much this child still needs her. And this is the whole thing. It's all about a contest over who the child wants. It's not to do with what's best for the child. It's to do with proving that you are needed more than other people. And I mean, she, as I said before, her character is just so unbelievably horrible. You really cannot have more contempt for anyone in cinema than this woman. She is just appalling. And you think it takes some real skill to invoke that kind of emotion from somebody, in that all you're doing is playing a character on screen and they just invoke such hatred and enmity towards them. So it's some great performances in there. It's a nice little story, as I say, it's a bit cliche towards the end, but it's a good little story. It's not a long film, which is something that a lot of films this year have been. It's quite a short film in that respect. It's got a nice story to it. It's got some great performances to Maisie herself. Steve Coogan essentially just phones in his performance, really, because we know he can do basically that kind of performance standing on his head. It's the standard Steve Coogan being unbearable arsehole kind of performance. The nanny, sort of, her accent tends to wander around a bit, which is a bit strange, but she does imbue to the role this idea that she genuinely does want what's best for the child. And that's really what's at the heart of this film, is that why do two relative strangers have the interests of your child more at heart than the parents do. So I'd say if you get a chance to see it, I certainly would. It's definitely worth a look. Cracking little film. Absolutely loved it. I'll see you soon. Tra.